Итак, мы начинаем третью секцию нашего блока «Архитектура, урбанистика и дизайн». Я напоминаю, что этот блок организован при поддержке компании «Инград». И я приглашаю очень интересных спикеров. Все три женщины с интересными судьбами, карьерой. И я сейчас их объявлю. Итак, я приглашаю на сцену Терри Дван, итальянский архитектор, основатель студии Дван Studio. Ула Хелл, архитектор, член палаты архитекторов Больцано, Италия. И Эво Кастро, архитектор и создатель студии Плазма Studio. You're welcome. Thank you. Terry, la prego a prendere il posto. Итак, мы начинаем нашу третью секцию с выступления известного итало-американского архитектора. Здесь немножко есть Калифорнии, стиль Калифорнии. Adesso spiego un pochino, poi Terry Dwan. La invito a iniziare la presentazione. I invite you to start your presentation.
Hello, everybody. I'm Terry Dwan, and I'm really thrilled to be here. This is my first time in Moscow, and I'd like to thank the Ingrad company for hosting us. This is quite an event, and I'm thank you for all for being here today. So, since I'm not a natural speaker, I wrote things down so I won't forget them, but I will have our show, lots of slides, so it'll be entertaining, I hope. Today I want to share with you a little bit of my own personal journey through many countries but in a search for happiness and authenticity and courage. I also want to talk a little bit about our search for innovation and sustainability, and I think that these are important roles. These are topics that if we women don't embrace, I don't think anybody will. So I think the biggest trends in the next 20 years for us in the industry will be that towards happiness and wellness in the homes. And the real measure of luxury will be how we treat ourselves behind closed doors. But what will make us happy behind closed doors? And how can we apply that to our professional lives to positively transform our industry? Choosing to create a truly humane environment could have a ripple effect on our families and our communities and, of course, our whole natural world. If we never identify our goals, however, how will we ever know that we'll get there? Push. Grazie. For me, happiness starts with the woman who mattered the most. Of course, that is my mother. She was Italian, and this photo was taken by my father in our 1950s California home briefly before she was told she only had 2 years to live. She was pregnant at the time with my little brother and did not know it. Shortly afterwards, she started treatment, and she confused the symptoms of the chemotherapy with the nausea from her pregnancy. Despite that, she gave birth to this fourth child, and all went well. She defied all odds of surviving Hodgkin's lymphoma and set a new direction for this kind of cancer treatment. I clearly thought she was going to make it. 17 years after this photo, however, just as I had started university, my mother passed away after her long struggle. When I went back to university, a university professor sat down next to me, and instead of giving me a hug, he just recited a poem. Cambia, grazie. The poem went, I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear and learn by going where I have to go. I took that to mean I live to die and live slow. I feel my fear and my fate in something so immense we cannot even fear it. And I learn by going where I have to go. Cambia? My mother survived her sickness all those years by going where she had to go. by experiencing treatments that were painful and new. Here are two Gunther Ford paintings from 2007. Because of my experiences with my mom, creating emotional connections has been my goal in life. In a recent TED Talk, designer Ingrid Fettel talks about the basics of joy and turns to neuroscience to find the answers. She discovered that bold, lively, colorful designs lay in the visual stimulation it creates in our brains. Cambia? Ingrid describes how an environment like this apartment we recently designed in Milan, with paintings by Ford and sculpture by Keith Haring, could be considered joyful. Joy transforms spaces. Here I sought, with the curved sofas I designed for Driade, to create a joyous but intimate ambience. In our roles as urbanists, architects, and designers, how can we learn to heal our environment with technology and sustainability, and to improve the lives of our cities and our homes and our communities? Cambia? Following are some photos of a family burial chapel I designed for the famously cheerful Piero Busnelli, owner of the B&B Italia Furniture Company. I live in Milan, which is known for launching new trends and designs in architecture. But seldom do we talk about humanity in our work. What makes us truly happy humans anyway? Is it really only created by endorphins, serotonin, and dopamine? Women are natural designers of creating shared consciousness and meaningful connections. The most profound and ritualistic moments of our lives that have been practiced for thousands, maybe millions of years, have been created by women. These endless tasks we women perform in our homes are most commonly surrounded by preparing the evening meal. But do we professional women dare cambiare to talk about real values in designing homes? Are we too stigmatized by the fear of seeming too old-fashioned, too traditional, too feminine? What other rituals do we women that are rooted in our makeup, our gender? Well, truthfully, nobody could argue that women do not make children. That's probably the ground rule here, right? We women confront often other sensitive issues that others don't want to engage in. So, for example, when I was asked to design Piero's family tomb, I asked myself, did Busnelli, the owner, and B&B, ask me, a female, to design his tomb because the male Italian designers he knew were too superstitious to take on the task? Did Piero see me as courageous to take on such an emotionally charged project because I was female? Spiritual places can create meaningful encounters to our identity. Cambiare? I designed the subtly pink facade since Piero always wore pastel-colored shirts. He wanted his family to remember him through this gesture. Families and friends bumped into each other 2 weeks ago in the local cemeteries in Italy. These personal interactions are the basis of community and social cohesiveness. Cultural identity is strengthened by this activity. The streets, the little streets in the cemeteries in Italy 2 weeks ago were busier than the shopping streets in Via Monte Napoleone, if you can believe it. Death is the darkest. Cambiare? I love that about Italy, that humanity is created by authentic connections with others, enhanced through rituals. In this family chapel, I used a large monoblock of stone to represent nature as a central focus. Death is one of the darkest themes that we are all aware of, despite the fact that we try to ignore it completely. A sacred site allows the living to accept that there will come a day when we do something for the last time. The diffused light of this facade creates a suspended place of reflection, reflection on our expression of love and with those closest to us. The architecture I enjoy most is that of making sacred spaces. Cambiare? We live to die, and thinking about what traces we leave behind for our families struck a chord in me due to my mother's passing. I grew up in an environment of the constantly shifting ground of my mom's health, as well as the occasional earthquake in Los Angeles. Cambiare? Mental flexibility was key. Architectural flexibility was key too, for survival during big earthquakes. This temporary stage set type of construction in Los Angeles created a longing in me for permanence and solidity, as did the passing of my mother, which created a longing in me for longevity. I actually felt the lack of accumulated memory in Los Angeles, nicknamed appropriately so Tinseltown, due to the flashy and superficial Hollywood stage set. Cambiare? Cambiare? This is my current atelier in Milan, but growing up I longed for a stable and quality set of materials which challenged mortality, which would not get trashed in the next earthquake, which could be passed down generation and generation. I sought a memory as a link to pass on values. I saw timeless materials with which I could grow old. Cambiare? My studio is in a 200-year-old masonry building with wide arched openings. The art of architecture is in the capacity of an architect to create lightness. To render light that which is heavy is authenticity in art. But what is true authenticity? Cambiare? After my mom's death, I left university to seek my fate in Italy. I was looking for my roots because my mother was Italian. I found a college in Florence called Studio Art Center, SACI. One day I was told by a professor to report to the Gabinete dei Disegni, literally the bathroom of the drawings. Well, it's really the room of the drawings. It was in the side corridor of the Uffizi Gallery, and you were supposed to come only with a pencil and paper. Cambiare? Before us were boxes of photocopies of artist drawing dating back almost 1,000 years, and we could choose just one drawing. I chose a Peter Paul Rubens sketch, and to my surprise, the original drawing was brought out to me. I sketched from that sepia for several hours, and I was transformed. I finally understood the meaning of true authenticity. Peter Paul Rubens' DNA was probably still on that piece of paper. Our Saatchi professor, rightfully so, this is authenticity. One drawing at a time, one encounter at a time. Study the authenticity you see before you. Why do you think this is called Studio Art Center? I'm glad I am an artist, and I have studied different materials and different scales. I feel that I apply the same values from everything from silver chopstick holders to furniture to homes. I am a maker. Cambiare? The heavy structure of my studio is contrasted with the fragility of these maple shelves, skylights, and artificial lighting. The sustainable maple interiors in my office were built by the company Riva 1920. And they asked me shortly after to design a furniture collection for them. I was surprised that the owner of a company, an Italian company, had the courage to ask a female architect to design a collection. This was many years ago. What I designed for Riva was completely new to the almost 100-year-old company. Cambiare? One of the first lines of products for Riva could be entitled Cedar Coming Out of the Closet. This little round object is called Maui. I designed Maui to emphasize to Riva clients the hidden secret of Riva's wardrobes, which was scented cedar. Maui was originally carved from a solid piece of windfall tree, those that fall naturally in storms and must be dragged away. Maui is sustainable as well as innovative, using computer-controlled cutting. Imagine the experience of taking a deep breath of scented cedar. The showrooms were literally filled with the cedar scent, which had come out of the closets and released itself. Clients were comparing this scent with the usual artificial glue smell of most modern closets. Clients liked the sustainability of using reforested cedar, cambiare, in the closets, but oddly enough, another thing transpired. Here is a photo of the Andaz Hotel in the island of Maui. Oops, cambiare? Ecco qua, grazie. In the island of Maui in Hawaii. The lobby is filled with a cedar scent of the Maui stools. Real luxury is how we treat ourselves behind closed doors. The endorphins created by the olfactory brain sensor stimulates the joy parts of our brain. Cambiare? People were moved by the simple design of the natural concentric rings of the tree trunk, called, appropriately so, the heart. The items began to sell as independent pieces, and we went on to design and market a whole line of sustainable scented cedar stools. Who would have thought, however, that there's a market for extremely hard, heavy wood seating? Riva handles wood like nobody else. They treat it like a wild animal. Solid wood is like a wild animal. It still keeps moving. Shortly after Maui started selling, I received an envelope from my ex-Yale University professor. I had not heard from this professor in many years. Inside was a cryptic note attached to a magazine clipping of the Maui stool. Dear Terry, he wrote, great to see your work. I'll bring my own cushion. To highlight the primitive nature of the massive wood that Riva dominates, for another product, I staggered 2 slabs of solid walnut with rough bark edges to create a table, leaving a gap between the slabs. I dedicated the table to, which I don't know if you know here in Russia, but the prehistoric cartoon city of Bedrock where the famous Flintstones grew and lived. This was not an obvious commercial product because who wants a slit running down the middle of their table? Instead, clients embraced the primitive nature of this piece. Cambiare?
Terry, le chiedo scusa, ma il tempo a sua disposizione è finito.
Ah, ok. Ho
Okay.
finito.
Sì, sì, time is over.
Ok, grazie.
Sorry.
Volevo ringraziarvi per tutto quanto. È stata, oops. I want to thank you for having me up here, and it's been a great experience. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Просто хотела добавить, что все работы Терри, они символичные, по-своему монументальные. И можете посмотреть также совместные работы с мужем Антонио Четыре, известным итальянским архитектором, дизайнером. И сейчас мы начнем следующую презентацию. I would like to ask about the presentation. Eva, Ula? Eva, yes, Eva. But presentation will be separate, separately.
One after the other.
Yes.
Let's say maybe one interrupts the other. This could be.
That happens sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
But it will be separated. I will
Together,
start.
but we start together.
I will start and then she will follow.
Yes.
Io comincio e dopo lei continua.
Okay. Lei parla italiano?
Un pochettino.
Per me meglio. Окей, allora la invito a iniziare, и мы начинаем презентацию очень интересного дуэта создателей Plasma Studio, Евы Кастро и Улы Хелл. Prego, possiamo iniziare.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. I just realized now that 20 minutes is incredibly short and that I put far too many slides, so I will probably rush through it in an incredible manner. We wanted to call this talk in between practices, in between scales, and a little bit this alluring to the fact that we are ourselves in between different backgrounds, in between different countries, and different genres, if you wish. We have offices in Italy, in China, in London. I have 2 offices, one dealing with a larger scale, the other one is Plasma Studio, and we are all sort of interconnected by a kind of a same origin, which is academia within the Architectural Association. At the moment, Ula is involved in Innsbruck. I'm involved in the Singapore teaching, Xinhua, and so on and so forth. So somehow the work that we do expands not only from different backgrounds and locations, which then informs in exchange different scales of work and different sensibilities, but also in a way it is always fed by the experimentation that we do within academia. So putting that on the side for a moment, I would like to move into what really sort of interests us, which is, let's say if I would take this image as a starting point to explain what we are interested in, is the capacity of creating this incredibly phenomenological variation, but at the same time with this incredible weight and solidness that appears only when you kind of fine-tune and go through. That is a thought that often we kind of discuss and sort of argue in between us, let's say the female part of the team versus the males in the team. And of course, that brings us to think about nature and how do we understand nature. All of our work is related to that. And we have you have many designers or architects that think about nature as a way of kind of mimicking or copying or naturalizing their designs. We are very interested in the artificialization of nature. So we like a nature that is man-made, that is artificial, that is kind of controlled by us, but that yet it kind of is able of rethink kind of social relationships, even if those are penguins. We have different ways of appropriating the space, different ways of talking, of relating to each other, depending on the ground where we sit and how we sit. So let's say, to make it kind of in short, there are a set of dialectics that we are interested, which is the relationship between the object and the larger scale of the context, the iconicity versus what gives the kind of consistency of the field, the diagram versus the index, and within these dialectics, probably the one that kind of excites us the most is the one that kind of discusses order versus chaos. Grazie. So in a way, the relationship between order and chaos is one that I think every single designer kind of carries in its DNA, because it's the wanting to let go and things to happen and almost work through the design as a guinea pig, whilst as well kind of having the top-down control of what happens and how it happens. So naturally, from what I said before, we have split the lecture into kind of two different practices, which is on the one hand, my practice at the very large scale, and it is a large scale that stems from the location what I'm working with, that is Asia. And the second part of the lecture is the smaller scale, which stems from more the kind of a boutique context of the Italy office, which Ulla will introduce. So now I will really rush. This is a museum that we designed and won the competition in China for a low-carbon museum that not only is meant to be low-carbon, but is meant to display new technologies sort of related to being kind of sustainable. So in a way, the whole design of the project was generated doing various simulations, both for kind of solar radiation, but also the movement of the water, because the whole landscape and the building is meant to be a machine that can organize the movement of the water, collect the water, recycled, work with the solar panels for radiation minimizing, etc., etc. Second project that we did is kind of possibly one of the first projects where we started to truly discuss the relationship between the ground condition and the building, and trying to understand how a ground can be artificialized to an extent in which it becomes architecture, and the architecture in itself can be naturalized through that same language so that it speaks the language of the landscape. And I love this image because it truly challenges a figure-ground relationship to the point in which you cannot tell, well, hardly you can tell where the building is located. This is a project for a Xi'an horticultural fair. It was built in 2011-2012 in Xi'an, China, and it's 37 hectares of a park that we have designed with this kind of a really challenging, this kind of a axial, very masculine understanding of going from A to B, and just inviting for the ludic understanding of playing around the site and kind of diverting the flows. We have a building that I will show later, 2 buildings, one at the edge, which looks like this kind of a airplane stealth, and a glass house in the back. Those are some kind of details within the park that again they kind of portray the collection of water and to develop really kind of a well-sculpted, formed ways of channeling the water and collecting it at a certain points. The night views where the lighting is used in a very minimal way to create darkness, to create kind of a sense of solitude in a context like China where you have, I don't know, 300,000 visitors in one day. Then we produced these kind of triangulated patches, which is very much a part of our language. And these triangulated patches are then originally during the expo sort of organized with flowers, which then afterwards are naturalized and used as a kind of bigger trees that take over the smaller paths. This is one of the buildings that we design in there. This is the greenhouse that has a kind of a very long
access?
No. Me olvidé del nombre. Where you have the structure, space frame structure that goes all around as in a U. But what it does is actually, it starts by disappearing, by cutting off within the topography. So you need to go under the topography. And as you turn around well beyond the topography, which means that then on that edge, which is the one that we're seeing here, it exposes itself with kind of a higher radiation for the plants that require more of a tropical context. This is the second building. It's a very blurry image, but it's on purpose just to make the point that the figure ground is really challenged. And then the building frames flows through it, is organized in 3 fingers, and these 3 fingers become 3-dimensional funnels that allow you to pass through, to get shelter, but to also frame our neighbors and what is on the other side. And again, I like very much this image because you don't really know if it is hardscape or if it is a building. And that's more or less what our work is really about. In this second project, which is one that we are working right now, we have just submitted for a big master campus for the university in Izmir, Istanbul. Our inspiration was a quarry. And how we came about to think about it is as a kind of in a way as a second nature, as a form of adding to the landscape, but without actually importing alien systems, but actually excavating and regenerating or generating form from within that. This is the overall landscape, and it's all the paths that we generate within this very sloped topography. And then the various buildings, this is the main university organization with the different faculties where all the buildings become part of these fingers, and these fingers become in exchange pedestrian paths. So you walk under, you walk on top, you walk through, and through it is that you gain accessibility to all these pots that are then starting to frame smaller pockets for more kind of domestic, private kind of a spacing. Assuming in one section of what the model would be, the entrance, and then this is another part which is for primary and secondary education, but again, working with the same concept of how to deviate bands so that they can adapt to a larger topography or to a steep topography, and then using the roofs in itself to blend with the landscape and to walk through the whole development so that there is a kind of a seamless manner of flowing from one into another one. This is the main library of the campus that it adopts a little bit the kind of presence of a stone within the landscape, but it still is hugely formed by all the paths that kind of flow into it and through it. And this is the overall view. This is the last project that I will show. It's a park. It's called a designer's park within a larger scale expo that took place in Beijing, and we were invited to design this kind of a small park. And what we did is we decided to completely shift the scale and to imagine that each of the patches within the park are like mega pots, and then, but they are mega pots where by then you feel very small and you walk through it. So it becomes a little bit of a labyrinth, establishing different relationships between the walkers by and the pots, where in some of them you need to kind of look through a peephole, in some others you are invited to go walk through a ramp and go on top of it, and some of them are completely open. And we were very excited about the possibility of kind of again, challenging nature. What does a landscape architect does with a park, or versus, you know, what we would do with a park, which is more of the build-up of a mini building that has kind of a greenery within it, but it sort of describes the notion of a landscape and a path through. Ulla.
Hello. Now I pass a little bit, let's say, to our project, which we did in Europe. Actually, our Path Together started in Europe, in London, and we started with really small projects, small scale, small refurbishments. Hotel Puerto America for us was a great experience. It is like the flagship hotel of Silken Hotel Group. And every floor was designed by another star architect. And we, by that time, we have won the competition for young designers, and were then challenged to build what our concept was. So here you see the standard floor of the Hotel Puerto America with all the partition walls, the long corridors in the middle, the lift, very standard, straightforward. And this was the departing of what we tried and wanted to challenge, really this experience from once you exit the lift till you go to the room. So what we took as driving points were the partition walls of the single rooms, the entering doors, which were like fixed parameters, and then we challenged the space around that by going what is the possible height, what is the lowest height, what is the most narrow point, and what we developed was this challenging path by using also stainless steel, the material which a little bit alienates you from what you expect in a hotel, but challenges really the way. We added then a color scheme, which then naturally leads you to the room and where you are, like instinct, you follow the instinctive, the circulation, starting from this central spiral leading you to the room. You find you, okay. Okay, once then you reach your room, which then is like a following up of this alienating space, but getting you to a more cozy environment, which almost works like a filter towards the city. You enter the room, you have, let's say, on your one side the bathroom, which is shower, bath, punching to a glass wall and then unfolding to the back of the bed. You see then this spatial arrangement here, sink punching through the glass and becoming back of the bed, developing into a desk behind the bed. And here you have then the more cozy materials instead of the really hard ones you experience in the corridor. So the next project is a really tiny one, and it is set where we actually have the Italian office. It's in northern Italy, a very different environment towards China. It is set within the mountains in a scenario similar to this. Again, this is a project. It was a villa from the 60s, not too spectacular. The house had a big garden. But we decided, instead of putting a second volume in the garden, to occupy the existing house. The house hosts the apartment of the client's family, father and mother. And what they wanted to have a house with a separate access. The parents didn't want to have a flat roof, and the client didn't want to have any form of pitched or half-pitched roof. So what we developed was starting from the split floor division of the existing house, let's say a space covering the existing volume. We added sections and frames, which repeated the rhythm of the scale accessing to it, and we formed like a roofscape, which hosted then the house of the sun. So not a pitched roof, not a flat roof, but a spatial experience, which then is repeated. It's almost really a roofscape. And again, we follow what you cannot say we imitate nature, but we add something to it. A house called Esker House, and also the inside follows the challenging spatial experience you have from outside. And so this hits almost like a parasite on the existing building. The second one is a new build multi-family or multi-residential building, again in the setting of the Alps. It sits at the end of a village, at the border of a village, and we were imposed to use the pitched roof. So again, we worked with this rule to use the pitched roof, but also as the site was in a very steep topography, we tried to find how to find connections to the topography. So what we developed was a series of horizontal bands going around the volume, looking for connections to the topography. And then the second concept was to follow like a gap between the building, which divides one apartment from the other in the same floor. And so we worked with those bands and the vertical strip through the building. In this image, you can see the both concepts. The materials used in this concept very often is wood, as it's large wood really from the area. The other one in here is pre-oxidated copper, which blends very well in the winter landscape and in the summer landscape. So I don't know what is the time. The time is over. Okay.
I'm sorry.
We had twice 20 minutes.
50 minutes, but you have 3 minutes.
Okay, so this is again building with on an existing building. Actually, it is a listed building. So on one side we couldn't do anything, but on the other side we got the freedom to give more quality to the inhabitants. So we took the roofscape, we sliced it up in order to provide outside spaces and a lot of light inside the room. So here you can see the interior images, how it translates to that. The next one is a series of 3 buildings. I go now very fast. Which one is the Strata Hotel we developed back in 2008. It was an addition to a holiday residence. Again, steep topography, and what we took the existing topography, took the topography lines as a generator of the volume itself, horizontal strips through the volume, over the volume, and which also then finally went into the volume. So the volume is surrounded by those bands. You can almost not tell what is built up, what is the natural environment, and it translates into the interior. So we have the same size of those wooden sticks going around, following up through the inside. You see a mock-up in the making. Then the next one is the neighboring building, which was also again a building of the 60s. Instead of pulling it down because it's not so precious, we choose to use what you could use and to take away what was not usable under the pitched roof because it was too low. Due to the really closeness of the Strata Hotel, we again took those wooden sticks, this time challenging it a bit more to see how far we could go in the fabrication of a prefabricated, laminated wooden construction. And we took those 2 wooden strips to surround the building, to go over, grab the old one, go behind, and create, let's say, yes, it's my home, this one. And yeah, you can see how it takes the old one similar to the Esker house. It has yet then another extension of holidays apartments, this time The topography was really steep, and the concept was, again, of course, due to the vicinity, to take the wooden strips, but this time not to follow the volume from above, but to grab it from beneath. On top, we just left the topography going over, and then to bring then the wooden strips to the onset, we lifted up the steep hill, gave space to our access and to our parking. And again, it lies between the old volume. We bring the sticks into the building. You can see how it develops from one side to the other. And finally, it ends beneath the building. And as we work also in really, really small scales, a lamp we developed for Evo Lab. It's an Italian producer of outside lighting. And I finish with this image. And as the day before yesterday, I was at a concert of U2, and Bono wrote this sentence on the big screen: I leave all women with a nice day.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Я бы хотела сказать, что студия занимается биоурбанистикой. У них очень интересные проекты для организации пространства, и они чувствуют природу и соединяют эту природу с строительными проектами. В отличие от наших любимых подрядчиков, архитекторов и застройщиков, которые почему-то у нас не так ее чувствуют. Я надеюсь, что Plasma Studio сделает много проектов в России, вообще хотя бы научит или посоветует, как реорганизовывать некоторые пространства и сделать их более простыми, понятными и человечными. Thank you very much. You are welcome very much in Moscow. Benvenuti a Mosca. È piacere di avere qui. Grazie per aver partecipato. Niente, vorrei invitarvi a andare backstage, dietro le quinte. Thank you very much. Go to backstage.